Noah Bennett was the kind of student every teacher would wish for: quiet, hardworking, and respectful. At 16, he had grown up understanding the value of kindness and perseverance. His mother, Sarah, worked long hours as a nurse, and his father had passed away when he was just 8. Life hadn't been easy for Noah, but he never let his struggles dim his spirit. Instead, he poured himself into his studies and helped his younger sister Emily with her schoolwork. But Noah wasn't popular. He wasn't one to speak out loud in class or hang out with the cool kids. He kept to himself, carrying an old backpack that had been patched several times and wearing clothes that were neat but far from trendy. He was invisible to most of his classmates, and that was fine with him. In stark contrast stood Mrs. Patricia Graves, the school's senior English teacher. She was known for her sharp tongue, strict demeanor, and favoritism towards students who came from affluent families. Mrs. Graves didn't tolerate mistakes, and she had a knack for belittling students who didn't meet her high, often unreasonable standards. To her, students like Noah were invisible, unless, of course, they made a mistake. The incident happened on an otherwise ordinary Wednesday. The students had been assigned to write essays about their greatest challenges and how they overcame them. Noah had stayed up late working on his essay, pouring his heart into the story of how he helped Emily with her learning disability while managing his own studies. It wasn't a polished essay. Noah's writing skills were average, but it was honest and heartfelt. When it was Noah's turn to read his essay aloud, he stood up hesitantly. His hands shook slightly as he unfolded the paper. The room was quiet, save for the occasional stifled giggle from the back row where a group of popular kids sat. Noah's voice was soft, but he spoke with sincerity. Mrs. Graves didn't wait for him to finish. "That's enough, Noah," she said sharply, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Sit down." Noah's face burned with embarrassment. He quietly sat back in his seat, folding the paper with trembling hands. "Class, let this be a lesson," Mrs. Graves began, her voice dripping with disdain. "When you present something, it needs to be worth listening to. This isn't a therapy session. We're here to learn." Laughter erupted from the back row. Noah kept his eyes fixed on his desk, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. But that wasn't all. Mrs. Graves picked up his paper, holding it between 2 fingers as if it were something unpleasant. "And look at this handwriting. Sloppy, just like the content. Noah, if you can't even write legibly, how do you expect anyone to take you seriously?" Noah didn't respond. He couldn't. The humiliation was overwhelming. Later that day, as Noah walked home, his mind replayed the scene over and over. He felt small, defeated. But as he crossed the threshold of his modest home, he was greeted by Emily's wide grin and a crayon drawing she had made for him. It was a simple picture of the two of them, hand in hand, under a bright sun. That drawing reminded Noah of his purpose. He wasn't going to let Mrs. Graves' words define him. The next day, Noah walked into class with his head held high. He handed Mrs. Graves a fresh essay, rewritten and improved. He had spent the night researching how to structure his writing better. Mrs. Graves barely glanced at it. "I hope this one is better than yesterday's disaster," she muttered loud enough for the class to hear. That was the tipping point for someone else in the room, Alyssa Carter. Alyssa was the star student and class president. She rarely spoke against teachers, but she had seen enough. "Mrs. Graves," Alyssa said, her voice steady but firm, "I think you owe Noah an apology." The entire class turned to look at Alyssa in shock. Even Mrs. Graves seemed taken aback for a moment before regaining her composure. "Excuse me?" she said, her tone icy. "You humiliated him yesterday," Alyssa continued, "and he still came back today, trying to do better. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Learn and grow? You didn't encourage him. You tore him down. That's not what a teacher should do." Mrs. Graves's face reddened, but she didn't respond. The room was silent, the tension thick. Noah looked at Alyssa, gratitude filling his chest. He had never expected anyone to stand up for him, especially not someone like her. That day marked a turning point. Mrs. Graves, though reluctant, toned down her harshness. The principal later received multiple complaints about her behavior, and an investigation was launched. By the end of the semester, Mrs. Graves was reassigned to a different school. Noah, meanwhile, gained confidence. He realized his voice mattered, and he wasn't afraid to use it. He even joined the school's creative writing club, where his essays began to shine. Years later, Noah would look back on that moment not with bitterness, but with pride. It was the day he learned that standing up for yourself and for others could change everything. And that's the story, guys. I hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I did in creating it. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new adventure. And if you really loved it, share this story with your friends and family. Let's spread the word together. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep exploring. Hope to see you soon. Bye.